Everyone, thanks for joining to our weekly meeting for our software supply chain security working group. Ollie, it looks like you've got the first item here.
Sure. So I'm working on adding additional claims to the ID token. Based on the PR to map GitLab claims to full CO claims, it looks like there's 5 new claims that we need to add. They're runner ID, runner environment, SHA, and pipeline ref. And yeah, I'm hoping to wrap that up this week. Marshall, I think you have something on that one.
Yeah, I just I noticed we had this GraphQL endpoint that seems to like unravel all of those different mechanisms of include into, and it just produces a raw HTTP URL string that you can fetch the YAML from. So whatever logic is there might be useful for.
Oh, that's
this case
great.
as well.
Thanks for sharing. I'll have to look at that.
I don't know that it's necessarily comprehensive. I mean, I assume it probably has to be for the thing to work, but yeah.
Cool. And Marshall, I think you had another point.
Yeah, on D, I was wondering, like, do we care to normalize those values at all? And like, what do we expect the values to look like? I think they should probably be like fully qualified references, since there's so many like different cases to accommodate. That seems like the lowest common denominator. But I know that like there may be a bit of a balance between like what we produce and like what Folkio actually maps into the certificates. And I was wondering, like, maybe Billy has an opinion on whether there's value in having some consistency in like the URI refs between GitHub Actions and GitLab CI, since it's what folks are going to write policy against.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would, at minimum, aim for consistency within GitLab. So the main thing we want users to be able to use these refs for is to basically be able to reproduce the build config that was used for a particular run. So if you need to say like, oh, hey, there's this production artifact, we want to be able to go back and say like, can I redo what was done and get the same artifact? And if you can't do that, then that's a problem. That's sort of what we want to get towards. For consistency between like GitHub and GitLab, it would be nice just so that like users can have a similar experience between different CI providers, but I would not say that's a requirement. I think there's going to be some things that are going to be hard to map across just because like how GitLab handles fetching, URLs is probably different than how GitHub does like resolving workflow files and stuff like that. So I'd say do the best you can, but if there are differences, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Are you fudging the claim values at all from GitHub currently, or are those the raw value? Are the values that get embedded in the certs right now exactly what comes through in the claims?
They are being derived from the token, the token claims. So they may not map one-to-one. There might be some transforming that's going on, but we always derive the information that we get from the incoming jet.
But there's like, as far as there's not like consistency that you guys are already attempting to enforce between providers, right? You're basically just taking the raw claim values and when it comes to like the workflow and job graphs.
For the most part,
yeah. Quick question based on what Billy said. Does that mean we should include the SHA when we're referencing a config file, like if it's a repository or external project source?
Ideally, yes. We want to be able to pinpoint like the exact version of something. We're also talking, I forget in what thread, when we're fetching some of these included files or the pipeline files, something that would be nice long-term is to have like a SHA-256 digest of what was fetched. So even if we can't like necessarily fetch it by the exact SHA, we should still be able to say like, oh, if I go refetch that value, is it the same as it was before? And that would also be valuable for being able to determine if it's something that you can reproduce and was it the same value and workflows like that.
Makes sense. I'll move on to the next point. I was wondering, when do we need an API endpoint to request an OIDC token, as well as like the predefined variable that tells you where to exchange a CI token for an ID token, if we want that sooner versus later, just to decide what I'm going to be working on next after adding the claims.
I think in terms of like the near term work, we can probably punt it for now. My initial concern with the token as like the ID token value was whether or not that would time out or it would be a short-lived thing. I think Marshall, you said that it should match the lifetime of the job, which should be fine. If it was like a 5 or 10-minute token, then I'd be a little bit more concerned. But if we're expecting that to live for as long as the job is, then great. That should be fine.
Yeah, it looks like it lasts. So the build, the CI job has a timeout, and I just took a quick look at code, and like the expiration time for the JWT is the same as the job timeout. So if the job finishes early, that token will still be valid for a bit longer.
Yeah, and that should be fine. The endpoint will let us dramatically scope down the timeline. Like we can make it 5-10 minutes if we wanted to, and we could just refresh as needed. So long term, I think like, yeah, we do want to do that, but for now, like just relying on the long lived timeout seems okay.
Yeah, it's the maximum job. I think I'm going off memory, but I think the maximum job timeout is actually absurd. It's something like 30 days.
I believe it.
I guess it helps a bit that like the audience claim will be validated. But yeah, it not good having like shots that expire after 30 days sitting around. And I guess also in the short term, like people can reduce their job timeout to like, I think the default is 1 hour, right? But like signing anything is not going to take more than 5 minutes probably in a single job. So yeah, you can mitigate it that way. When for providers that do support ambient credential detection, you all generate a new JOT every time like cosign or any other 6-store libraries is called, right? There's no like built-in caching or anything. Like there's no reason to reuse the same JWT multiple times, is there?
Not yet. We've been talking about it. So we actually have a caching mechanism for GitSign already, because for rebases, people tend to get really annoyed when 10 browser tabs open all at once. For the CI stuff, it's less intrusive, so it doesn't really, people don't see it as often, so it hasn't really been a concern for cosign or other client libraries. That said, we know that Kubernetes has run into some problems with like trying to request too many things all at once, because they sign like hundreds of image all at the same time. So we've been thinking about it. But as far as I know, Kubernetes is the only one who has run into any problems so far.
And I guess like your contribution of reading from that environment variable is a good workaround for that case too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the main concern is we do have rate limiting on the Fulcio side for like tokens. So if someone does try to hammer Fulcio too much, like we will push back. I forget exactly what those rate limits are off the top of my head, but again, the only project I've heard of that's run into those problems is Kubernetes.
I think it's on to you, Billy, for 3.
Oh yeah. So this is just the regular check-in. Yeah, so no major updates since last week, except for we got that 6.js change in. We're still working through some of the Fulcio stuff, though. We've made some progress here. We've loosened some of the requirements for like the build signer digest, and we're adding more guidance around SANs. I don't think this changes any of our plans, so I think we're good to go to push forward, but just a general FYI. Besides that, I've been starting to work on the NPM CLI stuff, basing it off of the existing Salsa 0.2 work that GitLab already has. I don't know what your plans are for Salsa 1.0. Last I heard, I think that's dropping tomorrow. So just something to keep in mind on, but for now, I'm basically going to mark it as like a V1 Alpha 1, base it off the 0.2 API, and then we can iterate from there. However, we won't actually be able to use this in practice and try it out for NPM for real until the Fulcio things land and are pushed to the public good instance. So that's going to be like the long tail blocker. So the sooner we can sort of unblock the Fulcio stuff and start making progress there, the better off we'll be.
How long does it take to deploy to the public instance after we've landed something?
Assuming nothing goes wrong, it could be as fast as a day or 2. Assuming nothing goes wrong.
Just to answer your half-assed question there, your implied question there of like our roadmap plans for Salsa 1.0. Right now, we're really focused on signing. So, we can keep adding more stuff into the build attestation, but it's not really useful if the attestation can't be verified. And so this same working group that we're in now is probably going to end up circling back and adding additional fields into the attestation itself to adhere with what probably would have been Salsa level 3. And now, I know they've kind of changed things with the new Salsa 1.0, but basically on our roadmap, that's all follow-up stuff after we finish the signing, because we want to have the signing in place first.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good to me. I mentioned it because I know that GitHub has been talking about changing their NPM provenance to using Salsa 1.0. So I'm not sure if my assumption is our preference is to keep GitLab provenance roughly the same, maybe some slight differences, but roughly the same. And so targeting the 0.2, the existing one, probably makes more sense here.
Yeah, at least for now, that would be the target, is what we've got today. We're not going to make any changes to the attestation until after we finish this whole signing project. So that would be the next step after this. So until then, no changes.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Another point on B, I don't know if I think it'd be a pretty trivial thing to do, Billy, if this is one that you want to take. But we can start layering in the ID token generation and then running npm publish with the, I think it's applied as like provenance or something.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that this template remains compatible with, let me just type it out. There's like a couple of cases. Like one is that like you can be pointing at GitLab's built-in registry, which won't support this stuff currently. So making sure that still works. And then when you don't have like the ID token specified, I don't know what the behavior of npm publish with the provenance flag is if you don't have a token, but I assume it probably fails. So making sure that like we detect whether that's present or not, that sort of stuff. There's one other thing I was thinking of, but I've lost it. I think the main thing is making sure that you're pointed at the npm registry and just not breaking it when you're not, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And can you remind me, like, what is the last bullet under B, the signature verification? Like, is there anything that we need to do specifically for GitLab with that one?
I don't think so. My understanding there was that was a like make sure we can actually like npm verify the things that we push from GitLab. The other thing, once we have the Fulcio stuff in as well, there's that little badge that shows up on npm for like pointing to the provenance. We'd like to get integration there. That is unfortunately, I think, more on npm side than it is in our control though. But I've already kicked off an issue with some folks at GitHub for like what do we need to do to start, getting that data to populate. But I think a lot of this first step is like we need to have the data there to have some examples to point to.
Because the registry interface and everything is all closed source, right? Like that's 100% on them.
I think so. I'm not 100% confident in that though.
Okay.
The npm registry, is that what you're talking about?
The npm UI, yeah.
And then last thing on C, I know Brian's already working with the registry team on like what it's gonna look like in the user interface for signed container images. But Billy, you had expressed interest in adding like Git sign signature support to Git commits as well. Brian, I think like I don't know what your timetable is on the container registry stuff, but given that we already have Git commit signature verification, it might be easier to do the Git sign integration first, and then use that as like a building block for the container registry, especially if you're planning on doing it all on the Rails side.
So I've actually worked on the commit signatures extensively, and I'm confident that it would be easier to go the other way around because the commit signature code is ancient and it's not very good. And so I would like to build a new system instead for like the Fulcio signature verification and then use that for Git, because I've made changes to the commit signatures before and it's really, really hard to add new stuff to that code.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I totally get that, like, this is all a superset of just the baseline 509 certificate.
Yeah, and the X509 also, there's a lot of problems with it because like it was a community contribution and you can't use it on GitLab.com because like it uses the system trust store. And so like I feel like that feature is very, very underused and nobody really knows how to use it. So I think it's something that's very, very untested in practice.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the like back channel communication between the registry and Rails, I feel like is going to be the annoying part of all of that. I mean, we already do that. I can't remember what for. But the registry already like notifies Rails of when manifests are pushed and deleted for some reason. And so I guess that's what we're going to piggyback on, right, for the certificate verification.
Right. Right now there's no system. There's like right now Rails doesn't know anything about what happens in the registry. So I don't think we're reasonably going to be able to add a system for that to like notify Rails when new images get pushed or anything like that. So
So
we-
I think actually the registry has implemented hooks that you can hook into to get notified on push. We were actually planning on using those for our continuous container scanning. I think that has been in the product for maybe about a year at this point. I don't know if that'll be useful to you or not here, though.
yeah, I remember that. I remember hearing about that. Like it would be a really good thing to have, but I think it was just a prototype that one of the engineers did. I don't think it actually got merged into the product.
That might be something to double check on, because that's different from the latest that I've heard on that topic.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, right now I was just thinking about like doing signature verification on the Rails side and just like doing it every time we fetch the images. The thing is if we have to do caching, then it could get complex pretty quick.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, you might want to double check on those push hooks. I know the composition analysis team is going to need them for continuous scanning, and they have that planned in the near future anyway. And I honestly think it might be in the product. I don't know if it's just a rough prototype or if it's functional code that you can use and rely on. I'm not sure of its state, but I think there's enough interest here in the next 6 months that, you know, you could probably even get help from Olivier's team on composition analysis or someone else too, if we needed extra people to help implement that, because it's something we're going to need. If that's the route you decide to go, of course, it's up to you. I think doing it on the Rails side and caching is a viable approach too. Just trade-offs either way.
And see, I'm looking forward. Billy's doing some interesting stuff related to meeting like the Salsa 4. There's like a source requirement around two-party reviews. And I don't think there's any like anything concrete in terms of like how that will be implemented broadly, but it will presumably be some sort of signature that's embedded into like the Git repository or commit somehow, right, Billy? So like I think we would presumably end up using like similar mechanisms to reach that Salsa 4 requirement.
Yeah,
I think,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, that's probably a good discussion for another time. I think we've got some good ways that we could potentially just add that into the attestation that we already have. But that's probably, that could be a pretty deep discussion.
Yeah, when you brought it up, I started thinking about it, and I'm like turning my brain inside out, trying to figure out how you would solve that right now.
Yeah, it's a really hard one. But like I also think that it's kind of our like, because it's so hard, it's like sort of our responsibility to solve, because like ideally you want it integrated into the MR approval process or something like that, right? Where like users can, but it also has to occur on like the merge commit, which is the extra tricky part. Yeah, we can save that for another time. There's plenty of things that we need to do before we can even possibly do that. So
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, thanks. Are there any other topics in the 1 minute we have left? All right, well, thanks for joining, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a good one.